Pardon? Voici.
Well, waiter, this food has snails in it. Snails.
Oh, escargot. C'est excellent, madame.
Am I supposed to eat this?
Hein?
Am I supposed to eat?
Oh, oui, madame. Mangez, bien sûr. Voici. Comme ceci.
Si?
Oui, comme ceci.
Maybe if I had some ketchup. Ketchup.
Sauce tomate.
Sauce tomate.
Tomate?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sauce tomate. Lots of it. I think an American cousin of yours ate my geranium plant.
Hi, Mr. Aguilar. How are you?
Good, and you?
I have a question for you. What does multiculturalism mean in education for you?
For me, multiculturalism in education means that I think administrators, teachers, and students, we have to understand that there's diversity in the classroom, that not everybody has the same values, the same approaches, the same institutions, the same expressions, and we have to value those differences and understand that everybody has the right to express themselves in different ways, and we have to make sure that we do not discriminate against other people's values just because they're different from ours.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon and bonjour. I am a foreign language teacher, and as such, I believe that teaching multiculturalism should be in the core of our everyday curriculum. Teaching multiculturalism is just teaching students how to be more open-minded, more tolerant, how to be more curious, how to embrace and research and get to know values that might be different from their own. I believe that encouraging multiculturalism, it's extremely important, especially now in the light of what is happening in the world. Thank you.
Hi, Miss Cesareta. ¿Cómo está?
Muy bien, gracias.
Miss Cesareta, what does multiculturalism in education mean to you?
Primero, buenos días y gracias por dejarme decirte en español, it's more easy for me. So, para mí es bien importante y es una gran experiencia que he tenido en este país, donde nuestros colegios están con grandes diversidad de estudiantes de diferentes lugares. Tener en cuenta las diferencias culturales, sociales y personales de nuestros estudiantes nos va a ayudar que cuando vayamos a nuestras aulas, nuestros niños se sientan más confortables porque van a saber que en todo momento sus diferencias van a estar presentes en nuestras clases.
Our multicultural societies are faced with the challenge of constructing spaces that need to reflect and incorporate the diversity of their citizens. The Declaration on Race and Racial Prejudice, elaborated by UNESCO in 1978, is one of the first documents to talk about multiculturalism in education. Article 5, paragraph 2 says the following: States, in accordance with their constitutional principles and procedures, as well as all other competent authorities and the entire teaching profession, have a responsibility to see that the educational resources of all countries are used to combat racism, more especially by ensuring that curricula and textbooks include scientific and ethical considerations concerning human unity and diversity, and that no invidious distinctions are made with regard to any people. By training teachers to achieve these ends, by making the resources of the educational system available to all groups of the population without racial restriction or discrimination, and by taking appropriate steps to remedy the handicaps from which certain racial or ethnic groups suffer with regard to their level of education and standard of living, and in particular to prevent such handicaps from being passed on to children.
Multiculturalism and the multicultural movement aspire to achieve equity for all students regardless of cultural background. The movement gained momentum in the 1970s and 1980s. Scholar Carlos Diaz believes that the demographic shifts in the United States, often called the Browning of America, will have serious implications for the schooling system. Sonia Nieto was a pioneer in the field of multiculturalism. She based her research on her experience as a young Puerto Rican student in the Brooklyn public school system, whose first language was not English. After many notable works, she warns us that multiculturalism in the classroom does not simply entail celebrating ethnic holidays and being trained in cultural sensitivity. She also believes there are social and political operations that affect student learning, and we should look at this on a macro level. Equity began with the Brown versus Board of Education, which desegregated schools. Later, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title VI, prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin. This included discrimination for activities that had any type of federal funding, which included public schools. Title VII prohibited discrimination based on race, color, national origin, religion, and sex. An amendment to the 1964 Civil Rights Act included the Bilingual Education Act, which was the first to recognize the federal government's responsibility for funding English acquisition for immigrants at a federal, state, and local level. This movement was largely started by Spanish speakers. Many amendments would later be added on to the BEA, and one of the main cases that influenced this was the Lau versus Nichols case in 1974. Finally, the American with Disabilities Act and Florida Equity Act of 1984, among other legislation, would influence the education for English language acquisition that Florida students would achieve, including in Miami-Dade County.
Are you all right?
Oh, I never was so glad to hear anybody speak English in my life, even you.
What happened?
I don't know. Nobody speaks English. They're all foreigners.
The sergeant only speaks French. See, and now this other cop here, he speaks French and German.
Huh?
And this fellow, he speaks German and Spanish.
Oh.
So he's going to ask the questions and we'll translate them to you.
Oh, good.
Bueno.
Sehr gut. Wo ist cet argent?
Wo haben Sie das Geld her? ¿Dónde toma ese dinero?
Where you get the money?
I got it from a man on the counterfeit.
Me lo dio un hombre en la calle, pero yo no sabía que era falso.
Eine Menge der Straße gebe ich zu mir, weil ich kenn nicht, was ist das Geld. Je l'ai reçu d'un homme dans la rue et je n'ai pas su que c'est faux. Ha! 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 Ha!
I am innocent.
Yo soy inocente.
Ich bin unschuldig. Je suis innocent.
Bien. Si elle rend l'argent, elle peut s'en aller.
Gut, wenn Sie Ihre Restaurantrechnung bezahlt, kann sie gehen. Bueno, si ella le paga de vuelta al restaurante, ella se puede ir.
Good. If you pay the restaurant bill, you can go.
Hooray!
Ole!
What the world?
Hi, we will be discussing what happens to a student once they come into a public school in Miami-Dade County. First, their parents fill out this home language survey and with their basic information, and there are 3 questions about: is a language other than English spoken at home? Did the students have a first language other than English? And does the student most frequently speak another language other than English? If any of these questions are a yes, students will be tested for English proficiency. The assessment was called CELA, which stood for the Comprehensive English Language Learning Assessment, and it has now been replaced by the Access for ELLs 2.0. Kindergarten students are administered all sections one-on-one with the teachers. Students in grades 1 through 12 take the speaking section of the test one-on-one with the teacher. The listening, reading, and writing sections may be administered in a group setting. So the 4 parts look something like this. So we have the speaking section, the writing section, the listening section, and finally the reading section. Once they are finished with the assessment, the student and the parents receive this individual student report that shows their proficiency level of each section and what that proficiency level means. This assessment shows evidence of program accountability, data for charting student progress over time, information about the language proficiency levels of individual students that may be helpful in making decisions to exit the English for Speakers of Other Language, the ESOL program, and diagnostically useful information about individual students' strengths and weaknesses in English.
After students have been tested, they are placed into levels ranging from 1 through 5, with 1 being the lowest and 5 the highest, at which time testing out of the program is a possibility. There are many myths that go along with being an ESOL or ELL student. That is why knowing what level or stage the student is on is very important. These stages give a clear indication of what the student is capable of doing with the English language, which should never be mistaken for a lack of ability in learning information for a content area. The first stage is known as the pre-production stage, or the silent period. Though the students have about 500 English words at their disposal, they are not speaking yet, but rather repeating or parroting what one says. Strategies for students in this stage are to pair them with a buddy who speaks their native language and utilizing many visual aids to make sure the student understands and builds vocabulary. The second stage is early production, where students now have about 1,000 words of vocabulary. They are speaking now rather than repeating, but only in very short chunks. Strategies to use with these students are visual aids, as with the first stage, yes and no questions, and materials with more simple text. The third stage is the speech emergence stage, where students now have about 3,000 vocabulary words which they are able to utilize to communicate with. They begin to use simple sentences with their communication, and though they are grammatically incorrect at most times, they are understandable. As opposed to correcting a student, one should model how to properly say the sentences. In this stage, work should be focused on reading for phonetic purposes as well as comprehension by answering questions through the use of graphic organizers. Writing in this stage should be personal writing, as it would bypass the need for comprehension and allow the student to practice solely writing skills. The intermediate fluency is our fourth stage, in which the student is now up to 6,000 words and using much more complex sentences. At this stage, a student is able to perform at grade level in some content areas such as math and science. They are also capable of synthesizing work and making inferences, but are still having many errors in their writing. The last stage is the advanced fluency stage, which means that the student is near native in their ability. Students at this stage will need the most support when it comes to writing and social sciences content area courses. Knowing these stages is one way to help students succeed without frustrating them. But we also need to take the family into consideration and make sure that we provide them with support as well. Simple things such as having newsletters and correspondences sent home in their native language and translators present during parent-teacher conferences make all the difference. We have to take a step back and look not only at the ESOL or ELL child, but his or her entire support team to ensure his or her success academically.
Back. Okay, yeah. My name is Carmen Yang. I'm the preschool teacher in Kaiming Head Start Sunset Center. Everybody do your share. We have 85% of children come from Asian family. Most of the family don't speak English at home. So the children come here to learn English. I have something sounds like oi, oi, oi. A pig! We read the book, Silly Sally. So first we introduce what's this story about. So I introduced the name of the animal, like pig, dog, loon, and sheep. So we use stuffed animal to emphasize that. I also have something which sounds like woof, woof, woof. Guess what's that? A dog. A dog. We will focus on the vocabulary we want the children to learn, so we will repeat it and emphasize that.